All right.
All right.
Let me
Let me
just. Okay, everything
Okay,
should
everything
be
should
working.
be
We can get
working.
started
Get
in about
started in
maybe
about maybe
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
I need to
I
run
need
a
to
few
run a few
final
final
tests.
tests.
Okay.
All right,
All right,
Collins.
Collins. I need to run one last audio test, and it needs to be someone who's not on this channel.
And
And there is literally no one who is online who is not in this channel.
You want me to go to main?
Wait. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Someone
disconnect.
Okay, so what I did probably wasn't what you were expecting.
Okay, wait,
who's
okay? Someone.
Can someone volunteer to disconnect? Right.
I just
Don't do it.
Don't do it yet.
Don't do it yet.
Here,
Yeah, I can tell you what to do.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. People just say stuff. Doesn't matter what you say.
Hello,
Say
hi,
that.
I
Hey,
did
me.
that.
And whoever else is watching.
It's echoing.
Yeah,
Echoing.
It's echoing.
Echoing.
Who's
Echo.
echoing?
Fun.
How bad
is the echo?
Mute the stream.
Mute the stream.
Yeah, I hear that echo.
Oh,
I
I
don't think
1
1
second,
second delay.
Not ideal.
Not ideal.
Okay.
No, there's an echo on the stream.
There's an
echo on the stream.
It's bad.
Yeah, if you want to deafen real quick, then I'll speak and you can just hear it for yourself. There's like, yeah, as you can hear, there's a bit of an echo to those who are deafened.
Only
I have the echo.
Okay.
Okay.
That's weird.
Yeah, that is.
Wait, only
I'm echoing.
No, I can hear an echo on the stream. Wait, no.
Okay,
so who's echoing? Is my voice echoing, or is everyone else's voice echoing?
It sounds like yours. Mine's is coming across fine.
It's only
mine.
All right. That's annoying.
That's annoying, and I generally have no idea what is causing this.
You can connect on it via a third account, I guess.
I sort
I disabled.
I
I
disabled
the audio, everything except the desktop audio.
Are you using OBS?
Yeah.
Or how exactly? Because like, make sure that your mic on, I think, your primary account, make sure that's off, so it's not picking that up.
Yeah. Okay.
Wait. Is this any better?
I'm trying to see, but the stream's delayed.
Is my echo gone now?
Yeah, that came
Oh,
across
that's a
better.
lot better.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like
It's
perfect.
better? Okay, awesome. All right. The problem turned out to be that despite turning my mic off,
Echo's gone.
Windows was still... Okay,
Echo.
awesome. Great. Great. So everything's working?
I
Yep,
believe
let's
so.
go.
Sounds good to me.
Wait, before we start, should we can people tell us how this is gonna work?
All right. Yeah, that seems fair enough. Basically just basically don't talk unless you're being prompted to talk. I think
All right.
that's a fair summary of what we're supposed to do here.
Liberal.
If you want to react to seeing results, that's fine. But just don't interrupt halfway through a result.
Just don't be a
Great.
dick.
Liberal.
All right. You can go ahead and post a link if the audio is working now.
Just think I can't wait till people rewind it to hear the first part.
Hopefully you can crop this later. Probably
What
not.
a mercy. Uh-oh.
Hi, Mom.
Well, no one's here. Just tell us how it ends.
All right.
It's like spoilers.
Yeah, spoiler. House and I win. We both Sierra Governor, Atlantic Governor.
You can probably
Landslides.
restart the stream by you just restart the stream. We can intro. Oh, too late. People are here.
Oops, I just closed the screen. All right, that's not ideal. The screen is... all right, the screen disappeared. That's not ideal.
I mean, it could be worse.
Trying to get it back. We're back. All right, the screen is back. Can someone confirm everything is working?
Let me just step for myself. Everything is going through A-OK.
All right. Testing 1, 2, 3. Great. All right. Can someone in the voice chat just say something right now?
Yo, what's up?
Awesome. Okay. We can start now, I suppose. Dobbs, are you ready?
I'm ready to get going.
All right. So welcome everyone to the August 2020 state election results. I'm Hurricane, and I will be hosting this results show tonight. I am joined by Dobbs, our election analyst.
Howdy, y'all.
Say hi, Dobbs. And I am also joined by various party leaders from all three major parties. I'm joined by President Ninja Dragon of the Democratic Party, along with Chesapeake Senator Googmaster. I am joined by Atlantic Governor My House on Fire of the Civics Party, along with Supreme Court Justice Joseph Ibney. Finally, from the Republican Party, we've got Melp, who is currently running for Chesapeake Governor, along with, who is our second Republican? We have three civics. Okay, never mind. We have three civics. Okay.
Wait, let me just go to the change of party thread. Give me a minute.
And we have Jacob and Austin for the Civics Party. All right. Let's begin by just starting with a quick overview of what the race looked like in the last poll. Just as a disclaimer, these are not results that you're about to see. These are the day 4 polls that Quinnipiac University released about 4 days ago now. Let's start off with expectations in Atlantic. In Atlantic, you had the Civics Party start off with a lead, and they seemed on the cusp of a majority. However, by day 4, the Civics were on 44%, the Democratic Socialists were on 40%, and the Republicans were teetering on the brink of viability at 16%. Very quickly, party leaders, do we have any expectations for Atlantic?
Well, I would
we can go in alphabetical order.
By party or?
By username in this group chat. How about we start with Goog?
Well, currently, the AC has for a little bit been quite the stronghold for the Democratic Socialists, even when they weren't one party. And while certainly the day 4 polls didn't have us in the best position we've been in, we really think we can pull out a win, and we won't see a total destruction of Democratic influence within AC this election.
Jacob?
Sorry about that. I was calling. Can you repeat what you're asking?
What are your party's expectations for the Atlantic Assembly race?
You know, I think Hurricane that we're going to do pretty good in Atlantic. I think that Governor House on Fire has been great. So I think that we have very positive things coming from Atlantic for us.
Would you agree with that, Ibney?
I do think that there's going to be some good results coming out of Atlantic, especially with the good polling that the Civics are showing. However, without My House on Fire at the top of the ticket, you can probably expect there to be a bit less enthusiasm, as you know, it's not a governor race. It's just a by election. So I expect the Civics and the Republican coalition to probably take this. Democrats get 3 seats, Republicans probably barely hold on to 1, and the Civics take the other 3. It'll be interesting to see how the assembly elections go after that.
Ninja, what about, would you agree with Goog about the Democrats' chances?
See, I actually disagree with Goog on this. It's been a pretty consistent trend that whichever two parties coalition, they tend to win in Atlantic. And that has steadfast fast throughout this entire election. We keep seeing over and over again the Republicans and the Civics put together warrant a majority. And I don't really foresee the possibility of them not taking away 4 seats tonight and putting the Democrats into complete opposition in the furthest north state.
All right. Thank you for that. Let's move on to just to sum up the other 4 states real quick. In Chesapeake, the last poll had incumbent Governor C. Dockerow at a 10-point deficit behind Republican challenger Melp, who is here with us today. In the Assembly, we have the Democrats on 48%, just at the cusp of a majority, while both the Civics and the Republicans are sitting in the 20s and 30s. So they might get either 1 or 2 seats depending on how the popular vote falls in the end. Just real quick, let's start off with Chesapeake Democrat Chair Goog.
This election has certainly been an interesting one with incumbent Governor Sedock swept into the seat. Not elected, but put there by the leaving of the former governor. And this race has been back and forth the entire time. And although the last polls didn't have Governor Sedock in the best position, I do think that certainly we can't call it over for him. Melp has put up a pretty superb fight, and I couldn't possibly tell you how it would go off the top of my head.
All right. Let's now go to the challenger. Mr. Melp, you are the current chair of the Republican Party, and you are challenging Governor C. Dockerow. How do you think this race will end up?
Hopefully this race goes the Republicans' direction. This is just a victory for me, but for the GOP as a whole, the last few days have definitely been a bit rough for us, but hopefully this is one election that we'll be able to take in the bag and set an example for the GOP that we're not down for the count, so capable of winning a race.
And for the Civics, Governor House, how do you think the Civics will do? Do you think 31% might translate into some gains in 2 seats, or 1 seat, or maybe even 3 seats?
I think we have a good chance at 3 seats. Definitely 2 seats. I do not foresee us getting 1 seat unless the voters really do not want to show up and vote. But I have a feeling that they'll want to show up and vote for this election.
Thank you. Now let's just move quickly into the next state, Dixie. In Dixie, for the governor's race, we have an open seat because Governor Board Nerdy Gamer is retiring. And the 2 people vying to take his place are Mr. Whitey's Awesome for the Republican Party and Trip Lyons 18 for the Democratic Party. They are neck and neck. The last poll had them at 50-50. While the Assembly also seems very close with the Democratic Party at 49%. So it could go either way. It could get 3 seats or 4 seats unless there's some massive swing here. While both the Civics and the Republicans sit at the brink of viability because of a surprisingly strong challenge from independent candidate Cry Defiance. Let's go right now first to Mr. Ibney for the Civics. How do you think the Assembly race and the governor race will turn out?
Well, Hurricane, I got to say, this is probably the race that most of America is looking at the moment. Specifically the governor's race, obviously. We have a strong challenger on both sides from Mr. Whitey is Awesome versus Tripp. One of the main contentions in this race has been some comments made by Mr. Whitey is Awesome, specifically around transgenderism and some other stuff like that. A more conservative viewpoint from a political sense on that fact. So it's interesting to see that despite the polls being so close between Tripp and Whitey, the Democrats are just dominating the Assembly. With the Assembly having such a huge not market share, excuse me, but a huge share of the vote, it's understandable to think that maybe the Democrats will actually come out on top on this one, specifically because they will have that advantage of voters going in so enthusiastically for the assembly. I got to say, though, the biggest winner out of all of this is got to be Cry Defiance, who is probably throwing a party right now with the fact that they're most likely going to be the deciding vote for who gets to be the assembly speaker, and it'll probably be them.
Now let's go to the Republican Party. Since is going to happen in these two races.
This race has been a really tough one for us. I'm confident that Whitey will become next governor, but it's really uncertain at this point, especially since the election has really been more of trouble for the GOP since the very beginning. We've had issues among all states, so hopefully Whitey wins, but for sure we have been struggling behind on the assembly, which I intend to fix, hopefully.
Thank you. And for the Democratic Party, let's get in Goog again.
Well, certainly Dixie has been a state to watch. I think we can all agree that of any state this election. There's no comparison on how high tensions are. And, both Tripp and Mr. Whitey have put in quite the interesting race campaigns. And while it is close, I do think that Tripley will come out on top in the governor race. And as for the assembly, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that we will see a Democratic majority. And the viability of the Republicans, I couldn't even tell you that either, but Cry Defiance in their independent campaign has also been something that has cut through the normal political campaigning that we see in this state. So quite interesting all around.
Thank you. And the last big ticket race in this election is for Lincoln. In Lincoln, of course, the Civics and the Democrats have been going at it for quite some time. And you see this especially at the top of the ticket where you have incumbent Governor Cuba's Castro District fighting to stave off a very powerful challenge from Civic nominee NMTTS. Meanwhile, in the Assembly, you can see clearly a very big three-way divergence with a slim plurality favoring the Democrats, but both the Republicans and the Civics both being viable competitors. And of course, the 15%, who knows? Let's see what our party leaders have to say about this race. Let's start with the Civics. Jacob, what do you think?
You know, in Lincoln, I think that we've consistently held seats there, and we're very popular up in Lincoln. I think that we're going to do pretty good. And as you said, we have viable competitors on all sides. So it's going to be kind of amazing to see what happens in Lincoln.
Thank you. All right. Let's go to the Republican Party now. Joining us is Check My Brain 11, the congressman from California. What do you think are the Republican chances in this race?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important to consider that when we drafted our agreement to coalesce with the Civics People's Party for this election, we didn't do so just for electoral odds. It's something that we're looking to change in the new Republican Party. We've had a lot of turnover in the last couple of days. And so going forward, what we should be looking at is this a victory for the right, for the Civics and the GOP, or is this a victory for the soon-to-be socialist-run Democratic Labor Party? That, by the way, their logo looks like a fucking Microsoft Office logo. And so I think going forward, what we need to look at is like the right's doing very well. We're picking up a combined 56% of the vote. Obviously, since things are split, that might not mean a full 4 seats. It might mean 2 and 2 or 3 and 2, ideally. But it's looking like we're going to pick up the governor's mansion. That's what really matters. We can stop any bad Democratic legislation there. we can really secure the W. No pun intended.
I made that logo, so I'll try not to take it personally. But now I will be moving on to the Democrat. How about Ninja? What do you think is going to happen in Lincoln?
Okay. So Lincoln, in my opinion, is the perfect example of how, in the past couple of months, changing demographics and generally changing the way we campaign is having a dramatic impact on where this race is going to go. Out of the 3 governor races, I would argue this is the one that is going to ultimately say not just where Lincoln lies, but the nation as a whole, and it's going to come down to the closest margin. I don't think that in MTTS can hold the firm lead that he seems to have now, especially based on the fact that just having followed the campaign on both sides, he seemed to focus on the areas where Cuba wasn't really hitting towards the end of the campaign, whereas Cuba was trying to come back and hit the areas where he had been largely absent for the latter half. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to lead to a result that's probably less than a percentage point. That is not just going to have sweeping impact on the states, but the second, potentially the civics get a stranglehold as far as winning a governorship, sets the stage for the potential that 6 months from now, they could genuinely be a viable contender for not just the minority party in a coalition, but the leading conservative voice in the United States.
All right, thank you. And finally, the last race is in the Sierra, where on day 4, the Democrats were on 53% and the Republicans were on 47%. Seeing as the Republicans did not campaign on day 5, I trust that the result of this race will probably not change much, so we will be skipping the analysis for what seems to be a fairly obvious result. Which brings us to the first actual result of this race. We are going to the Atlantic Commonwealth, where the Assembly will now be that the civics are leading with 40% of the popular vote, followed very closely by the Democratic Socialists on 39%, which means that they both earned 3 seats, and the last seat belongs to the Republican Party. Going forward, let's just clarify, let's not do analysis after every single race. Let's do it after every cycle. So we'll be going through the first congressional district of every state, and then we'll have analysis, and then the second, and so on and so forth, just in the interest of time. So let's just save the analysis for later and move on to Chesapeake, where the first district was closely fought between the 2 nominees. And it seems, if I can get the slide working, first, apologies, my computer is trying very hard not to catch on fire, trying to run a live stream and this PowerPoint. In the first district of Chesapeake, you've got Republican nominee Melp on 61% and incumbent Governor Seedagra on 38%, with a district turnout of 44%. And now keep in mind, the first district, which is the Delmarva area, is the smallest district of the 3. However, with a commanding lead like this, it seems that Melp is starting off the gubernatorial race in a good position. As you can see from the map, this can largely be attributed to the fact that Melp has swept essentially the entirety of Virginia, even in Nova, except for a handful of counties such as Arlington and Prince George, which are obviously very Democratic. Moving on to the next race, we have Dixie governor in the first district, which is Florida. Whitey leads Tripp by a very close margin, 51 to 49. And clearly from this, there's a lot that the other 3 districts will do in order to determine the results. if I can get the map working. In Florida, you can see there's a fair mix of red and blue throughout the peninsula, and the margin at the end is 2.2 points for the Republicans. And finally, going into Lincoln, in the 1st district, we have challenger NMTTS leading Governor Cuba by about 3 points, 1.9 million to 1.8 million. As you can see from the map, Governor Cuba is performing well in urban areas, but has lost essentially all the rural counties of Michigan and Indiana to his civic challenger. Party leaders, what do we make of these results? We can start with the Democrats.
I guess I'll jump in. I'm not gonna lie, this isn't looking great for us tonight. The fact that the conservative challengers in all 3 races have taken an early lead, particularly in Chesapeake, is worrisome. Mainly because I know for a fact, for myself and for Goog, it has been a large focus of the Democratic Party as a whole to retain control of the state after months and months and months of work to build up. And now it very much so seems poised to have a Republican take the governorship with a likely Democratic assembly. Our party is just going to be feeling a lot of disappointment as things stand right now. But I'm sure I speak for both Guga and I whenever I say that I'm optimistic that we won't be feeling too much propane tonight, and that there's a chance we can come back at the end of the day.
I agree with my Democratic ally. I think that certainly this is not the best start, but this is only the beginning. So we'll just have to see how this all plays out.
Before we go to the next party leader, let's hear from Dobbs with his expert analysis.
Well, you look at these maps and there is a very clear pattern. Maryland, for instance, Montgomery County is incredibly wealthy, it's incredibly affluent, it's incredibly white with a growing Hispanic population, but it went Republican tonight because Melp really moved the needle in suburban DC, and that was huge, and that's huge for his large lead. You can see a similar phenomenon going on in Michigan, where Democrats are underperforming in suburbs, but the civics and the Republicans are really picking up in those areas, whereas Democrats, fresh off their socialist merger, are doing very well with less wealthy, more ethnically diverse, and more blue-collar voters. And I think that you'll see that trend throughout the night.
Thank you. Now let's move on to the Republicans. What do you make of these first results? They seem to be pretty good for you.
Yeah, we're still holding our breath. We're still in the early rounds of polling, but based on the counties that have been flipping, I can speak to Chesapeake with a certain level of authority. I was senator of Chesapeake for about a full term, and winning Delmarva is always huge in these big races, just because a lot of the population of Chesapeake is centered around the DC area. And so the fact that Melp has such a throbbing lead in one of the larger districts is big news. But ultimately, it's going to come down to what the results like coming out of the Carolinas and Tennessee before we can speak with major authority.
Thank you. And finally, the civics. What do you think? You guys got 3 seats in Atlantic. Is this a good result? A bad result?
If you don't mind, Jacob, I'll take this one. Well, for starters, the turnout in Atlantic is pretty much what we expected, but also it's great. It means we will be able to help, along with our coalition partners, secure a majority in that state with a civics governor already in place. This is going to be great for his administration and for his policy goals coming into the future. As for the other races, I am astonished, especially for things such as Dixie, where Mr. Whitey is awesome is actually leading in Florida, which is a historically pretty middle of the road state. In most, let's say, just take a look at presidential elections. You'll see that Florida will usually be one of the very last things to be called, or at least close to it. It's probably usually one of the deciders. So for him to be leading in, not even leading, just securing DX1, I believe it's DX1, Florida, basically. That's a good sign for his election chance. As for Chesapeake, that's pretty obvious. That was coming without a shadow of a doubt. I do believe that this is a pretty much secured win for Melp. Cross my fingers. But other than that, we're just hoping for a continued good turnout for Nimitz and Lincoln, and for just a sweep across the board for the coalition.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the 2nd District races. We begin with Chesapeake's 2nd District. In the 2nd District, incumbent Governor Steve Acra leads Melp 60-40, which seems to be a complete reversal of the previous result in the 1st District, as you can see from the map here. As you can see from the map here, it's a very, very blue Ohio, along with a red Kentucky. Just in this, for the sake of time, we are going to go through all the districts first, then we'll have Dobbs come in with his excellent analysis. In the 2nd District of Dixie, Tripp leads Whitey 51-49. The 2nd District is Georgia and South Carolina. It is not Georgia and South Carolina, it is Georgia and Alabama. And you can see here, it's a very tight race in Dixie. Overall, with these two districts combined, Whitey currently leads Tripp by 0.4 points. And you can see here on the map, there's quite a lot of blue and quite a lot of red throughout this map so far. And finally, in Lincoln, NMTTS continues to lead Governor Cuba and currently has a combined 51.4% of the popular vote after the first two districts were counted. So the 2nd District is Wisconsin and Illinois. You see a lot of purple and some blue around. Dobbs, what do you make of all these results so far?
But if I could start with how blue that Ohio was, you saw an incredible drive for the Democratic Party. Republicans were essentially exiled to Western Ohio. Democrats did rather well in West Virginia. Kentucky, the Republicans swept up. It's a lot of almost bipolar results coming out of Chesapeake. Dixie is right on par. Like you said, it's incredibly close. You're seeing the Democrats doing very well among black voters, very well among rural voters. Republicans have clawed back a lot of support from the Atlanta suburbs, from suburban Georgia, and they've lost some support in Birmingham in Alabama. As far as GL goes, same story. The Civics are killing it in the Chicago suburbs. Meanwhile, southwestern Wisconsin is a Democratic stronghold, but they're losing heavily in the Milwaukee suburbs. They're losing in Peoria and Springfield. Meanwhile, the Republicans the Civics are eating up those suburban voters. And so I'm not surprised to see an incredibly close race that's driven by tensions between white affluent voters breaking for the right coalition and more diverse, poor coalitions breaking for the newly merged Democratic Party, carrying a lot of support over from the socialists.
All right, thank you. Now let's go to the party leaders for some quick analysis, emphasis on quick. Let's start off with the Civics.
Basically, it's, again, a great look for what's going on in Lincoln, at least. As for my comments on Chesapeake, I guess this is just saying, don't speak too soon. But mostly what I'm focusing on is the good victory margin in LN2. That was a worrisome district for the Civics People's Party, specifically for our candidate there. Whitey is still leading in the Dixie governorship race, so that's good to see. However, that closing lead is kind of worrisome, especially for his chances going into going into the other districts within the state.
Awesome. Let's go to the Democrats now.
Well, certainly in Chesapeake, we've seen a large swing. Many people, upon seeing the first one, they were quite concerned, but as we can see, this is a race that, as I said in my original comment, we cannot just say who's going to win right now. As for Dixie, we see that the race is tightening. While Whitey is still in the lead, we can definitely see that this is going to be a race to watch.
All right, thank you. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. Thank you. Now for the Republicans.
Well, this certainly is very tight races. We expected for Dixie to be very close. It's kind of a surprise for Chesapeake to be closer than we expected, but most governor races are close. That's pretty much it I can say for now. Don't want to speak too soon.
All right, and now we are going into the third and final district of Chesapeake, where the governor's race seems to be very tight. And in the currently, with the first and second districts combined, Governor Sidakra leads by 0.6 points. Let's see what the third district has to say about this. In the third district, Melp edges out Sidakra 50.4 to 49.6 with a margin, with a turnout of 47.5%. Now, let's see what this actually means for the race as a whole. Sidakra has been re-elected as Chesapeake governor by a margin of less than 15,000 votes among more than 13 million cast. As you can see from the state map, a strong performance in the Carolinas has managed to allow Sidak to edge out Melp and take the win by a very, very close margin. Which also means now that we can report the results for the Chesapeake Assembly. In the Chesapeake Assembly, it seems that the Democratic Labor Party has lost its majority. With 40% of the popular vote, they are on 3 seats, while both the Civics and the Republicans, who are around 30% of the popular vote, win 2 seats each. Now moving on, first you can look at this map. There's a lot of blue, a lot of rural areas, with the Democrats leading in the first and second districts, but the Civics actually taking the lead in the popular vote in the third district. We are now moving on to the third district of Dixie. If my computer will load the results. There you go. Senator Tripp currently leads Whitey 56 to 43 in the third district, which means that he now takes the lead in the race as a whole with 51.8% of the popular vote. However, we are going after this into a very big district, Texas, so the result is still up in the air. Finally, let's look at the third district of Lincoln. In the third, first, here's the map so far. You see a very familiar trend throughout tonight. You see both a lot of blue and a lot of red throughout this map. And finally, in Lincoln, NMTTS leads Governor Kiba in yet another district, 51 to 49, which means that he is currently on 51.2% of the popular vote going into Lincoln's fourth district. Dobbs, what do you make of this set of results?
Well, let's start with Chesapeake. Chesapeake was a barn burner. You saw Melp do very well in Tennessee and South Carolina. The issue was the incumbent governor had a lot of support on the ground in North Carolina. He had a lot of grassroots support. He was able to pull through with some incredible results from Ohio and North Carolina. Dixie, it is anyone's game at this point. Oklahoma and Arkansas were unusually blue. We're headed into Texas. No doubt this race will be decided in Texas. I think anyone would be foolish to call either Lincoln on these results or Dixie on those results.
See,
all right, thank you.
I somewhat
Who said that?
That was me.
All right, go ahead.
See, I somewhat disagree with your assessment in Lincoln. I think at this point, based on the first three districts and just the relative size of Lincoln 4, at this point, it seems almost a foregone conclusion that Nimitz is going to win that race. There's a chance Cuba could pull it out, but I just don't see that as a viable option. I do concur that Dixie is going to come down to the wire, but I don't see a way back for Cuba at this point. That's like, obviously that one exists, but I don't think it's viable.
Fair.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Nigza. Now let's go to the civics. What do you make of these results, especially with what's being discussed right now about the Lincoln governor race?
All right, I thought you ran to the. Go ahead.
So this is. I would like to just start with the Chesapeake real quick. I think the race was really close between Melp and CDOC. It was a really interesting race. It was really, no one could tell. 15,000 votes, very close. But we pulled it through in the assembly with a coalition majority, which was nice. As for our Lincoln, I think we're gonna win this governor's race in Lincoln. It's really close, but I think we got it.
If I may, real quick, I just want to make a comment. Chesapeake appears to be the biggest weight. It's all Ohio meme I have ever seen.
Indeed. Now let's quickly go to the Republican Party for their take on the set of results.
Yeah, like I said last go around, you always got to hold your breath in Chesapeake until you get to the Carolinas. They are the biggest district by far. Obviously, the results are a little disappointing. We wanted to help to bring this one home for the GOP, but at the end of the day, it shows that Republicans can win in Chesapeake, which wasn't always the true as far back as when I was a Bull Moose. Ultimately, a lot of the time, Bull Moose played Kingmaker. And so it's looking like a lasting CPP Republican coalition is one that's going to win over the long run in not just Chesapeake, but also Dixie and Lincoln. Things look really good in Lincoln. Nimitz is in a really good spot, being up by a couple % going into the smallest district, so small that I remember in coalition negotiations back in the day, the Dems and the BNP used to give it to the Socialists because it was so insignificant in larger scale races. But yeah, right. Dixie isn't promising, but I think we can turn it around.
Thank you. And now let's see the results. We are going into the 4th district, into Texas. As Texas might imply, it's the biggest district in the entire state. And, let's look at the map first for the 3rd district. And finally, first, let's go. We have results now from the Dixie General Assembly before we go to the 4th district. In the 4th district, it seems that the independent vote has collapsed quite a bit. And you have the Democrats on 4 seats with 49% of the vote, followed by the Republicans on 23% of the vote, which yields them only 1 seat, which is the same as the Civics, who are on 15%, and the Independent Cry Defiance on 14%. So based on these results, we'll see continued Democratic control of the Assembly. However, we're about to find out whether or not this will be a bifecta. And as we can, first let's look at the map for the General Assembly race. You can see the Democrats are actually leading in every single district in the state by double margins, which makes sense given the size of their popular vote margin here. You can also see there's quite a bit of representation of all 4 lists in this state by county. And finally, let's look at the governor's race. In the governor's race in Dixie, in the 4th district, Whitey beats Tripp by a 20-point margin, 60-40, which is more than a 1 million vote difference. Let's see what this translates into for the full race. In the full race, Ms. Whitey has been elected with 52% of the popular vote to Tripp's 48%. As it turns out, Texas really did decide the result of this race by giving Whitey such a large margin. So he now sits at 52% over 47%, and he overcame the margin that Tripp had built up in the 2nd and 3rd districts. As you can see from the map here, unlike every other district, Texas is very red, with Tripp winning only largely urban counties and counties along the Mexican border. And finally, let's look at the apologies. Now let's look at the 4th district of Lincoln. We are going to see a lot of declarations in around this time. The next race to be decided is Lincoln's 4th district, where once again NMTTS has won. So now he has won all 4 districts of Lincoln, this one by a much larger margin than the other 3, with 63% of the popular vote, beating Governor Cuba by what seems to be an almost 15-point margin. Which means with all of this, we can now tell that NMTTS has won the Lincoln governor's race with 52.9% of the popular vote, an almost 800,000 vote difference with Governor Cuba's popular vote tally, which sits at 47%. From this map, we can see that Lincoln is painted in purple, quite a lot of purple, in fact. And now let's go to Dobbs for some analysis from this very impactful series of results.
Well, look, the story of Dixie is an east to west comeback. I'd like to point out that Whitey is the first Republican, or will be the first Republican, to hold the office of Dixie governor since I was in office years ago. This is a historic result, and it all comes down to Houston. It all comes down to Harris County, Texas. You had Whitey losing in the Dallas suburbs. He was doing incredibly poorly in North Texas, but as you went south into El Paso and Houston precincts, he won in a coalition of very diverse, but also professional white-collar and gray-collar workers in Harris County and Fort Bend, across South Texas. And it was that huge wave of support in Houston that made Whitey the next governor of Dixie. Similarly, as far as the Great Lakes or Lincoln is concerned, the Democrats, they performed admirably. They held on to a lot of small towns in the Dakotas and Iowa, but ultimately it was the suburbs of Illinois and Wisconsin and Michigan, as well as total wipeouts in Nebraska and Kansas, that gave this one to the Civics. It was a well fought race on both sides, and the Republicans and the Civics earned both of these victories.
Thank you. Party leaders, just before we start with our analysis, you'll get a bit more time for this cycle. But first, let's just go with the 2 races that haven't been done, just to get them out of the way for anyone who's still waiting on results. First, let's go to the Lincoln Assembly. In the Lincoln Assembly, the Democratic Party, apologies for the error on the slide where it says Democratic Labor Party, is on 44% of the vote and has earned 3 seats, while the Civics, who are 10 points behind in the popular vote, have won an equal amount of seats because of the electoral system, while the Republicans on 20% have gained 1 seat. Finally, we have the Independent, Eden Hope Stan, who is on 2% of the vote and has won no seats. From this, the coalition will clearly have a governing majority in the state of Lincoln, which is a very big change from the bifecta that the Democratic Party held before this election. And of course, in the last race, first, let's look at the map. Democrats lead in all 3 districts, but by very different margins, with their vote share and with their lead in the 1st district, half of the one they have in the other 2 districts. And finally, let's look at the best state in the entire union, Sierra. This is my show. I get to say whatever I want. In Sierra, the Democrats are on 4 seats with 54% of the vote, while the Republicans are on 3 seats with 45%. When this race started, of course, it was neck and neck with both parties sitting on 50. But in the last 3 cycles, the Democratic Party made quite a lot of gains, while the Republican campaign seems to have stalled. You can see from the map that the Democrats, in fact, are leading in all 4 districts of Sierra. However, it seems that clearly that their large victory margin can be attributed to the fact that in California, so the 2nd district, Democrats lead by 16 points compared to very small margins in the other 3 districts. All right. Dobbs, do you have anything to say about these 2 races?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that there isn't much to say. Sierra is a terrible state. It's run into lots of issues with copyright laws and really just a land of brigands. In all seriousness, no. I mean, I think that Republicans, again, they didn't keep up their wave of suburbanite voters into the West, and that really cost them. You saw it in Denver, but you didn't see it in Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City County went blue. Washoe County, Nevada went blue. Clark County, Nevada went blue. Orange County, California went blue. San Diego, I could keep going. But that was the issue, is that the Republicans, they just lost steam. They lost Maricopa County in Arizona. They lost Phoenix. And it was that was the nail in the coffin for Sierra Republican.
All right, thank you. I believe now we have a couple of just broad summaries of the race so far. I haven't forgotten about you party leaders. We'll get to you right after we show a summary of these results. For the governors, as you can see, each of the 3 major parties has won a governor's race. All 3 of these seats were previously held by the Democrats, so that is a net loss of 2. Governor Sidakra has kept his seat in Chesapeake, while it seems that there will be a transition of power now in both Dixie and Lincoln. In Lincoln, where Governor-elect at MTTS will be succeeding outgoing Governor Cuba after he lost his re-election bid. And in the open seat in Dixie, you will have Mr. Whitey is awesome replacing outgoing Democratic Governor Board Nerdy Gamer. As for the assemblies, you clearly see that the Democratic Party has the most seats, but they do not have a majority of seats, which clearly shows that the coalition, in fact, is running ahead of the Democrats. The Democrats are on 17 seats, a net loss of 7. Although keep in mind that these are not all seats that were won by Democrats because of the socialist merger. While the Civics Party, which entered this election with no seats, will be leaving it with 9 seats in 4 states. Meanwhile, the Republican Party has also lost a few seats, 3 in fact, to end up on 8 seats. So now the Civics Party actually has more seats than the Republicans. And finally, of course, Cry Defiance and Dixie has won a seat for an independent for the first time in quite some time. So now let's go for analysis to first, let's talk about clearly the biggest winner in the assembly races, the Civics. How do you make of the results tonight?
I think that the results tonight, I think they look good for the coalition. I'm kind of surprised that we won. And now that we have like 9 seats across all 5 states, I think that we can push forward a lot of positive change in America. So I'm glad to hear that America elected us tonight.
Thank you. Now let's go to their coalition partners, the Republicans. What do you make of these results? You started off with more seats, but no governorships. You now have 1 governorship, but less seats. Is this a good night for the Republican Party?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, I don't think any of the internal struggles that have been facing the Republicans recently are any secret. But the fact that we managed to overcome it, as bedlam was happening within the Republican national headquarters and many of our state offices, the fact that we managed to elect a governor, be within 15,000 seats of electing a second, and cut our losses in the state legislatures while forming a strong coalition with the Civics People's Party in Atlantic and in Dixie gives me a lot of hope. And I think it gives Republicans across the country a lot of hope that this election was very out of character for our party. But, you know, give us another couple election cycles, we'll be back up to our old strength in no time. And I'm going to promise that to all of our voters, the people who may be disenchanted with where things are going with us and want to see a resurgence before they become loyal Republicans again. We'll make loyal Republicans out of you.
All right. And finally, let's go to the Democratic Party. The Democrats started off with a bifecta in 4 or 5 states. Of course, the Democrats leave with the plurality, along with retaining a governorship that seemed very close. However, is this a good night or a bad night for the Democratic Party?
It's not the best night. I think objectively we have to just look at it and say there were losses that occurred for our party. But at the same time, we also have to look at this in that every time a party wins control of all 3 branches of government federally, they do worse at the next election. That's just part of the push and sway of electoral politics in America. It happened whenever President Obama was elected. It happened happened after President Bush's second election, his re-election bid. It's just part of the push and sway of politics. Do I think that there's a lot of area for improvement? Yes. Am I confident that improvement will occur? There's absolutely no question in the back of my mind. If anything, this is going to light a fire beneath the Democratic Party going into the federal midterm elections.
Thank you. First, there's a couple of announcements. First, congratulations to Connie for getting the most accurate election predictions. This is a shout out. And now let's go to Governor House, who has some interesting analysis of the campaign.
Okay, so there was a lot of campaigning across all the different areas. I mean, I'm sure that everyone, or some people read the reports every day. Could see quite a bit, but sometimes the reporters just couldn't get it straight. There was a lot of times in which they kind of did not know what actually happened. You remember, candidates, that when you're going to go and campaign in one area, if you're doing mailers or holding a rally, you need to kind of like let the news know what you're doing. Otherwise, we won't know about it. And then the news reporters, well, I mean, they can't put it in there, and well, it doesn't look as good.
All right, thank you so much. Does anyone here have any? Dobbs, go ahead.
I would like to give, just as far as closing remarks go, this was an election of major proportions. There's no doubt in my mind that this would be an incredibly important bellwether for the next federal election. The reality is we saw major political realignment tonight. We saw suburbs go towards the right. We saw blue-collar workers shift back towards the Democratic Labor Party as the socialists were reabsorbed into the Democrats. So too was their base. But it's also an important thing to note. When the Republicans and the civics are existing in an environment together, the Republican base, the suburban, the wealthy, the affluent, that they win when they're running against just Democrats, are going to the civics. Republicans have to do some soul searching. If they're running against the civics and the Democrats, they're losing. That's what tonight showed us. So I think Republicans need to find a message that works, because right now the civics are sitting at the top of the castle with the Democratic mastery. I think the Democrats need to figure out how to rebrand their populist message. Obviously, they've got a good, strong base from the Socialist Party when it was absorbed into them. I think the Democrats have to do some building for the next election. And I think that the civics had a fantastic night tonight. Tonight was bottom line about political realignment. The blue-collar workers are going to the left. The affluent are going to the right. The affluent have made a choice about which party of the right they're picking, and it's the civics. And that's what we have to take away from tonight. A lot of seats changing hands and a lot of things realigning. Our political landscape is incredibly different from what it was just a few months ago, and tonight was a reminder of that.
All right. Well, that concludes the election show tonight. thank all the party leaders and Dobbs who contributed to the elections analysis tonight. You've made this show infinitely more interesting. I'd also like to thank everyone tuning in. Of course, there's been some technical difficulties. This is the first time in a long time we've done an election stream, so there's some kinks to work out. If you have any feedback at all, please let me know. You can just drop your feedback or your suggestions in the ideas channel in the main Discord server. And other than that, congratulations to all the candidates who won. Commiserations to all the candidates who did not win. And we will see you soon for the federal elections. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and good night.
Ligma.
All right, night, y'all.
That was fun. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, me too.
We're still live. We're still live.